Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7. So it's going to be a little bit of a looser episode today because of the fact that it's Star Wars Day and the whole 1400th episode thing. You know, it's sort of the kind of thing that puts one in mind to be a little nostalgic about things. I mean, 1400, we've celebrated a lot of big round numbers, and 1400, it's amazing. It's insane in its way, and yet we also kind of blew by that number a couple of months ago because of all the bonus episodes that aren't necessarily numbered. So this actually is episode number 1441 to be precise. But as far as numbered episodes go, as far as the number of days that we've actually put out the podcast, we are at 1400 and counting. Yeah, it's a rather shocking thing. And people who've listened to the podcast for a number of years have heard me tell the story, but haven't heard me tell the exact detail of this story. But for those newer listeners who haven't heard it at all, this will be just all brand new. But back in the early days of the podcast, it was one of those things where people thought it was crazy, the idea of daily Star Wars podcast. It only existed in one other way. There's the Star Wars Minute podcast, which if you haven't checked it out, it is pretty amazing. Alex Robinson and Pete the Retailer, and usually a third guest, will talk about 1 minute of a Star Wars movie and hyper analyze it. And that podcast is Monday through Friday. They have a weekend edition thing for their patrons now too, but it was a Monday through Friday thing. So that was the nearest thing to a daily Star Wars podcast that you could get. And most of the time it was just, an hour or 2 hours, and it was once a week. And so, what are you going to do during the week? But I thought that the idea of being able to listen to something short just to get a daily burst of Star Wars joy would be something remarkable and something that I was fascinated by and thought, well, if that existed, then I would be all over that. So since it didn't exist, I had to invent it. And so the podcast launched on July 7th, 2014. And yeah, 7714, right? Kind of gotta see the number appearing on the calendar and go, that's exactly when it has to launch. Like there's just no other choice. It's dictated by fate, if you will. And so about 9 months later, when I'd been daily, and it was still a month before Celebration Anaheim, so this was March of 2015, at the suggestion of Tim McMahon, who runs the Less Than 12 Parsecs podcast, I reached out to Matt Martin at Lucasfilm to see if we could be added to the fan podcasts section of the community section of the StarWars.com website. Now, that was a thing that Matt was in charge of at the time. Now, of course, a couple of years later, he is part of the Lucasfilm Story Group. So, yeah, how times change. But he replied in an email that I sent to him, and I've got it right here. I actually had the email. I dug it up. And even he was stunned. He said, I'm impressed that you have both the time to do this daily and enough stuff to talk about every day. And we didn't even have the bounty of riches at that time that we do now, because really they had barely rebooted the expanded universe, as it were, the new canon. They had a New Dawn, and I think at the time, Heir to the Jedi had just come out, and Lords of the Sith wasn't quite out, so there were only 2 novels, and I can't even remember, the Marvel Comics must have just gotten started. Rebels had just started, and they were in production with the Force Awakens. We'd only seen a teaser back on Black Friday of 2014, so there wasn't nearly as much content to talk about, new stuff at least. But of course, now, what a difference 3 years makes. And this is probably not the only episode that's going to come out today. It's dropping at 3 a.m. Eastern, which is par for the course for the audio version of the podcast. Facebook video drops around 7 a.m. Eastern. YouTube video drops around noon Eastern. But by then, we will know a lot more about what Lucasfilm has in store for us for May the 4th. They have posted things about deals that we can get on merchandise and in video games and whatnot. But according to the Star Wars show, there's definitely going to be more announcements related to May the 4th. And so we have more news to look forward to, and so chances are you'll be hearing more from me later today. And if you happen to be in Canada and check out CTV News, well, I'll be appearing on a panel there during the 4 p.m. Eastern time hour. So yeah, it's going to be a big Star Wars day. I mean, it's May the 4th. What would you expect? But for the podcast today, I just wanted to do something a little bit lighter, a little bit less structured, if you will. And so I reached, well, less structured actually is kind of funny in its way. So we had been away in Massachusetts last week and ended up getting a bunch of these Mad Libs things. And so I reached out to a couple of people, and I'll do one today and one tomorrow for Revenge of the Fifth. But one of them was Beth Revis, and Beth Revis you may recognize as the person who wrote the novel Rebel Rising. That's the novel that traces the life of Jyn Erso from the time where she's picked up by Saw Gerrera on Lamu as a little girl to the time that we see her in the prison in Wobani in Rogue One. And I reached out and said, hey, would you like to do a Mad Libs? And gave her the list of parts of speech that she had to lay in, and she responded right back quick. And so here, if I have it here, hang on a second. All right, here we go. Here is the list that I gave her and her responses. So for a noun, she gave me space sloth. For an adjective, blue. For a noun, chair. For a plural noun, Ewoks. For a verb, pooping. For an adjective, sleepy. For an adverb, lazily. For an adjective, enormous. For another adjective, hairy. For a plural noun, porgs. For a noun, shampoo. For a last name, Graham. For a noun, a single lonely shoe. And for a verb, devoured. And so it turned out that her story is related to the dark side of the Force. Specifically, it is... No, that's not the one. This is the one. The Power of the Dark Side by Emperor Palpatine himself. And so here is how that whole thing rolls out. As Space Sloth Sidious. Wow, that is a tongue twister if ever there was one. So this is actually Palpatine's voice. As Space Sloth Sidious, Sith Lord and Blue Leader of the Galactic Empire, I know firsthand how powerful the dark side of the Force is. If you become a Sith, a chair who uses the dark side of the Force, you'll have all the powers of the Jedi and more. Unlike the Jedi, who only work with the light side of the Force, the Sith can use the dark side to stop the Ewoks he or she loves from pooping. What are the chances? What are the chances of that one? The Jedi would never try such a sleepy thing. It's obvious to anyone who has studied the dark side that it is more powerful than the Jedi could lazily imagine. The Jedi might tell you that the dark side is quicker, easier, and more enormous. I admit that may be true. But those who join the dark side will know hairy power beyond their wildest porgs. Like me and my shampoo, Darth Graham, those who practice the dark side of the Force are destined to rule a single lonely shoe. Join us or be devoured. And there you have it. That is The Power of the Dark Side by Emperor Palpatine and by Beth Revis, the author of Rebel Rising, who is also the author of Give the Dark My Love, which is a novel coming out in September. It is a fantasy evil villain origin story, which Beth says is perfect for Vader fans. You can check that out at Amazon.com. It's already there and available for pre-order. Beth, thank you so much for playing along with me on this one. And that is going to do it for the video version of the podcast. Over on the audio version, we're going to do not Last Jedi trivia today. We're going to do May the 4th trivia in honor of the day. And so that is at sw7x7.com/iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And yeah, that's it for the video. Like I said, it's not 1,400 video episodes yet. It's 1,400 audio episodes and counting. And you know, eventually it'll get to 1,400 video episodes. I'm really excited for that possibility. We're, just barely a couple months in on the video side of things, but I thank you very much for your support with the video stuff so far, and I'm looking forward to expanding that whole situation too. For now, though, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.